the next session is how do we take this business priorities, this business perspectives from the leaders and translate that to ensuring we have a robust, secure, digital space for people, employees, customers, and ecosystem to come together. And for that, the next session is Securing 2022. I'm delighted to invite Mark Lindenmayer, Senior Director, APJC Services with Dell Technologies. He will lead this session. And joining him in this session are four distinguished IT practitioners. I have Gautam Bartake, who is the Senior IT Manager, Program Management and Service Delivery with Lam Research. Welcome, Gautam. Thank you very much for joining. Shitij Bhatia, who is the Regional Cybersecurity Manager with Sanofi. Thank you, Shitij, for joining us. Maz Mirza, Head of Information Technology with Mass Rapid Transit Corporation, Sindran from KL. Welcome, Maz. Thank you. And finally, Rafiqul Islam, Regional Director of IT Asia Pacific at Tate and Lyle. So we have a fabulous panel. So I will hand it over to our very capable moderator, Mark Lindenmayer, and take from the business issue to the practitioners on how to keep our networks and businesses secure and resilient in the coming years.
Great. Well, thank you, Manoj, and certainly thanks for the opportunity to host this CTO panel, and certainly thanks to Shitij, Rafiqul, Gautam, and Maz for joining me today. So we've already heard today, many businesses are really struggling to stay ahead of cybersecurity threats, and it's certainly very important for us to understand how these threats are evolving. So certainly getting that CTO perspective today is really quite important. As we've heard in certainly some of the previous sessions, we're continuing to see this alarming rise in the number of cybersecurity attacks, and certainly causing severe business disruptions in many cases. And certainly the other factor, one of the other key factors, is obviously this growing rate of the cybersecurity skills gaps that a lot of organisations are also encountering today. So certainly when we speak to customers from a Dell perspective, we always reiterate how important it is that they understand some of the key preventative, also proactive and reactive actions that they should be taking to stay ahead of any cyber security attacks and best protect their organizations. But again, it's very key to understand how these threats are evolving and what are the trends that are happening in the market and certainly in that space. So certainly by kicking off our panel session today, I want to start by asking our panelists, really from your own perspectives, as we continue to see some of these cyber security risks evolving, and we've certainly heard about how phishing and phishing threats are getting more sophisticated. I mean, we're seeing hackers, for example, using machine learning, using AI to very quickly craft communications and develop very convincing fake messages. We're seeing ransomware strategies evolve and attacks evolve. But really, to our panel, I'd be very keen to hear your perspectives on the measures that are being taken to help negate some of these threats. So I'll open it up and be very keen to hear from each of you. So Gautam, we'll maybe start with you.
Yeah. Thank you very much for having me here. Audio check. Am I loud and clear?
All clear. Yeah, all clear.
Okay, fantastic. So let me give you a very, very contextual response to your question. Briefly introduce me. I'm heading the Southeast Asia business and IT operations for Lam Research. Lam Research is into the business of semiconductor equipment manufacturing. We supply equipment for the manufacturing of the chips, which in turn are used on our computers, mobile phones, cars, so on and so forth. In other words, we are essentially functioning in a high-tech business environment. So cybersecurity is not a conversation which is only more prevalent or people are paranoid about because of the Ukraine-Russian warfare, but it has ever been the center point, especially with respect to the high-tech industries. And here's why I say so. more often than not, and especially given the fact that the pandemic situation literally forced us to accelerate our efforts into ensuring that we are able to supply chips to the marketplace to meet the ever-growing needs of the industry. And at the end of the day, when we are talking about technology, people just expect technology to work, right? Business as usual. But you like it or not, the biggest threat that we face, our industry faces, is ransomware. And there are numerous examples that we can cite of. A more recent one is where a company was basically asked to release or to basically well, about 10 terabytes of data was stored from that company, consisting of confidential data from 70 over 1,000 employees. And at the end of the day, the ask from the ransomware company was to remove certain features of the graphic card. I mean, come on, how bad it can get, right? The whole world is literally depending upon technology, and you get demands, and you have to contend with it. So, to my mind, ransomware is literally a big pain point. Phishing, yes, in the context of working in a hybrid environment in a post-pandemic world, it's kind of very difficult for an employee to be able to decide on their own whether to click or not to click. If you have to be working in an office environment, when in doubt, you would just go and check with your next door colleague before doing that click. So, sum it all, phishing and ransomware are two threats that bother us.
Oh, that's great, Gautam. And certainly a lot of those challenges we are hearing in a number of industries, a number of organisations we deal with. And you raised a very good point as well about some of the increases that we are seeing with the current Ukraine-Russia war, about some of the state-sponsored attacks and the increase that we're seeing there. And how about Rafiqul, for you in your industry? So obviously a bit of a different industry there in the food and beverage supply industry, but what do you see from your perspective, and how are those trends today impacting your organisation, your industry? Oh, Rafiqul, I think you may have maybe on mute.
Oh, my apologies, guys. I mean, this is a problem. Sometimes I start speaking without realizing my mic is on mute. So
no problem. Okay. We can hear you loud and clear.
Thanks. So in short, you can call me Rafiq. So I represent Tate and Lyle. Tate and Lyle is basically a food ingredient manufacturer. I won't go into the details, but if you have tested Milo, or if you have tested Coke without sugar, or if you have tested the Cadbury's, then probably you have tasted one of our ingredients, because we make healthy ingredients. Now, Gautam has spoken well on the current cyber threats which we all experience. Just to be brief, I will just share some of the things which we have done in order to mitigate it or avoid it. So, we have realized, and over the past 2.5 years, I mean, touchwood, we have not had any incidences, though one of our major suppliers, that is for the run-ups, that is Cognizant, they had a major breach, in fact, in last year. And how do we do that? So I remember the previous panel talking about AI, machine learning. So basically, I mean, there's a big role being played now by the AI and the machine learning. I won't go into those details. And we were using one of the tools like the Cortex, which is an EDR, which actually learns what kind of threats are happening, can happen. So before they become a trend, because I remember hearing people speaking a lot about trend, but we try to be, but we try to pick in before it becomes a trend. So basically, we try to spot the shades of trend that is yet to come. So that is reflected in the tools which we use. And getting this has not been easy. It basically annoys the senior management, and I'll tell you how we do that. Just very simple examples, and I'm sure a lot of you do it. We block zip files. We don't allow USB. It requires an approval from the uh, from the CIO. Then in selected geographies, I won't name it, just to be respectful to the audience here, we don't allow domain access. And also in some of the selected geographies, I mean, we really get under the skin, just to use that term for the marketing folks, because we don't allow them to use some of the prevalent, what is that called, the digital ecosystem tools. Again, for confidentiality purpose, I will not name it, because those are something, there are inherent risks because of the mechanism there, the government there, or whatever. So that is how we have kept our environment like secure. And we are heavily into the cloud. So we have actually almost replicated our on-premise security on the cloud. So some of the tools which we use are basically, definitely Palo Alto plays a big role. We use MDM for our mobile access, and we have the, and in fact, the other thing which we are heavily into, like in order to make sure that the people don't like, even disgruntled employees, I heard that they don't steal our recipes, because our USP is our knowledge. I mean, the R&D things we produce. So we don't want to be left in the lurch that someone takes our recipe. And as the previous panel said, now it hardly makes a difference whether you were a 50,000 employee company or a 10 employee company. So we value the IP protection with the topmost priority. So that is all I can say, just to end it.
Thanks, Rafiqul. And you highlighted something, an important point there as well. I know as we look to explore the right tools, implement policies as well, often to protect our end users, sometimes what goes with that, or what's required, is educating them on the importance of why we're making the changes. But how do you do that within your organisation? Do you find you have to regularly educate or drive awareness programs with end users, even with your leadership, to reiterate the importance of why you're doing these things?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't want to take more time, so I forgot to mention it. And we believe people are the weakest link, not someone externally attacking us. People are the weakest link, our internal. It can be intentional or non-intentional. So anyone, including the CEO or the board member, before being given access, they have to go through what we call the basic security awareness course. So full-time employee or a contractor, it has to go, and it has a limited validity period. So that definitely ensures. And of course, the other things, we have internal GAA, that is the Global Audit and Assurance, which I think almost every company has. That is a strict assessment of how we are doing, and it is not only IT; it takes into all the business processes.
Got it. Okay, that's really good to know, a good perspective. And I guess just moving to one of our other panelists, so Shitij, you're obviously within the pharmaceutical industry. You would have some very similar concerns there as well, especially around the threat of IP, threat of corporate data. But I guess, what do you see, certainly within your organisation or within your industry? What are some of those key cybersecurity priorities that you're facing today, and how are you addressing them?
Hi, thank you, Mark, for this opportunity, and good morning and good afternoon to one and all. I think post-COVID, we are in different digital era, because a lot has been changed in the last 2 years. The way we think, the way we work, the way we execute things at the business level, at the technical level, digital level. So I look after OT environment for the Sanofi manufacturing unit across APAC. And when we talk about OT, we talk about critical infrastructure and the people working with the critical infrastructure. So earlier we used to have a lot of manual process where we do a lot of manual stuff. Now, considering IoT, smart sensors, like Rafiq mentioned and Gautam mentioned about artificial intelligence and the kind of ransomware we are getting, the main key important aspect in this is the change in the mindset of people. Because as we moving from manual era or the manual to automation part, but people in their mind are not moving in this era, right? So it is very important to train them what should be the new threats that are coming, because I think when we talk about upskilling, hackers are more upskilled than the people working actually at the plant level or actually at the business level. So we have to join the league and make sure our people are also upskilled with the right technology in place, with the right business processes in place, so that apart from business they are working on, they should be aware of what is going on in the market, talking about supply chain attack, talking about, like Gautam mentioned, the ransomware, phishing attack that we are getting. Because people should know, if they're not applied for the job, they should not get the job offer, and they should not click such kind of mail on that, right? So they should be aware of all these small and petty things to make sure, because like Rafiq also mentioned, people are the weakest link. Because if they are not aware of, the more training you'll do, we still will get target for the attacker. So I think, considering the digital era, we have to be aware of the people. Apart from their business upskilling, they should be upskilling of what we have in the market and how to cope up with that thing. And second and foremost thing is about the vendor, because we have a lot of vendor or partner with whom we are working, and we are very well connected. So if they are impacted, we need to make sure we are 50% impacted without having impact on the system. So we have to make sure the vendor or the partner with whom we are working with, they are also secure, and they also follow the security practice. Because if they don't follow on that category, we are 50% under the attack. So that's the 2 point I would like to highlight.
No, that's great, Shitij, and I think you raised some good points. And again, I think that importance about education as well. And I think even when we put in our best efforts to educate our end users, our workforce, it's sometimes not enough. And I think I know Gautam, I think earlier raised the point as well about using detection and response capabilities, software tools, to also continue to look at, I guess, anomalies or issues that are happening within the environment that can certainly help identify or indicate any potential threats or where security has been compromised. But yeah, I think the education also goes very much in line with that. Now, Mirza, I think you might have had some issues just from the video and audio perspective. So hopefully you've joined okay now. But obviously, we'd be interested to hear from you from a public sector perspective, just on some of the key cybersecurity priorities that are happening, certainly within your organisation, and maybe some of those constraints that you may have to face as well, from a government perspective. So I'd be interested to hear from you.
Okay, good afternoon, Mark and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, members of the audience. Thank you very much for having me here. So looking at because our industry is actually construction. So we are literally a brick and mortar company, you might call that. So despite the pandemic and whatnot, I mean, our main core activity still revolves about, again, like I said, brick and mortar. So at the corporate level, I think my fellow panelists have touched earlier, this is about the supply chain risk management. Because when we construct a railway, we rely on tens and hundreds of contractors and subcontractors. And if you have noticed that the NIST framework, cybersecurity framework 1.1, the significant addition to it is on supply chain risk management. And that's what we're looking at. I mean, at the corporate office, we are establishing a technical baseline for our cloud-based systems. And we are also engaging our other business units, the end users, as well as the procurement department, to make sure that, we put in these control measures. Whenever we have somebody who wants to engage or purchase or subscribe to some online system, this is something that we have been talking about in the past, where we call it shadow IT. So we need to put a stronger clamp to control that even further now, with all the security risks that we are having. So, I mean, I've been engaging my procurement head as well, that, even there's a slight hint of cloud-based system, IT, or personal data. Make sure that you get the business unit to engage us prior to initiating the RFP process. That's on the corporate side. And the other thing is, because if you follow the news, we have just been given the green light to proceed with our MRT3, the third line for the third MRT line in Kuala Lumpur. So we are going into looking into how we can do a secure by design for all the OT systems, because like what we have right now for our existing lines, it's all about, okay, what we have now, we do an assessment, that's patch where we need to patch. It's more of that, just putting things on top of what we have already built. So with this new project, we have the opportunity to really see how we can get into the secure by design in terms of the project governance, in terms of the supply chain risk management, in terms of the internal competencies that we have, and then the partnerships with the stakeholders, partnerships with, for example, like cybersecurity Malaysia, how we can do this, and to get it right. Because the challenge for construction in our case is because the end-to-end cycle time for a project is about 7 years at least. So just imagine if in 2 years time we will be designing something that will only be operational like 5-7 years down the line. So obviously, when we first started 9.1, nobody talks about WannaCry, and suddenly before we complete our line, then everybody say, hey, are we protected from WannaCry or ransomware? So this is what we are looking at. In terms of how to do a proper secure by design and also the proper project governance, not just when we complete it, but even during construction, we need to make sure all our consultants, contractors, the architects and all that at least abide by certain standards that we will impose in our contracts with them or the agreements that we sign up with them. Hope that answers the question, Mark.
It does, Maz. And again, it's very, very interesting to get the perspective from the various industries, from all of the panel representatives we have here today. And I think you raise a really good point about how we often have to adapt our security policies, our security processes around some of the changes in our business. We know certainly with the impact of the pandemic, we've seen a big shift to hybrid work. You've raised some of the other challenges around leveraging subcontractors and other organizations within your business, and the maybe some of the challenges in having to ensure that security policies are keeping pace with some of those requirements. But I guess just in opening up to the panel as we get towards the end of the session, how else have security policies changed, or have you had to adapt them around the pandemic and around hybrid working environments? Have any of you got any comments or feedback there on what you've had to do in your organizations to shift those policies to keep up with some of the trends that we're seeing due to the pandemic?
Mark, let me take a stab at that.
Sure.
Okay, it's a very interesting dynamic. So due to the pandemic, our company literally tried to leverage a lot of technologies. And by technologies, I mean those technologies that are typically centered around Industry 4.0, such as remote troubleshooting and using Microsoft HoloLens as an example. Now, well, these are all good gadgets. Everybody loves them for the features that they offer, for the ease of use, convenience, cost savings, blah, 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 blah. But again, let's really face it. I think all of us over here, we represent bigger organizations. We will have our security department. We'll have dedicated focus, processes, procedures, risk management mechanisms, audits, so on and so forth. But one thing that we realize is as we continue to use these new age technologies, and I guess Shitij mentioned the fact that he is managing OT. We have a similar challenge at Lam Research. So we have this clean room environment where we are trying to establish a convergence between OT and IT. Well, we might be doing very good on IT security, but do we really even understand what OT security is all about? What about the standards, right? Are there any industry standards? How do we patch devices on the OT landscape? Because although we might be using very unique, hardened, customized computers, they serve a very different purpose, right? They serve a purpose in the entire product building, and it's very, very crucial from a business standpoint. IT is managing those devices, but do we really manage the same way as we manage our laptops and desktops? I think the clear answer is no. There's a lot to be done. And unless and until an event happens, people really do not know what to do, right? And it's a chicken and egg story in terms of where do you want to put your money. Now, the good thing though is cybersecurity has got a board seat, and that makes it a little bit easy for us to make certain investments. Talking about investments, I guess the investments in the OT space, in terms of not only the technology, not only the tools, but in terms of managing the process, in terms of literally doing a device management methodology, even having a set of architects look into what type of security controls we literally want to put in place. And it could be very, very different for a technology such as Bluetooth, which has been deployed in an OT setup, or an RFID, or an IoT. And every piece, as intelligent as it is, has very, very unique characteristics and unique operating systems and the computing systems, right? So that is a challenge, as I see, that has come about after the pandemic. The second piece, I think we some of us touched upon it a little bit. We are now hiring people who choose to work from home. So how do we literally, as an organization, cater to the weaker security that exists, which is out of bounds, out of control, right? People accidentally clicking on a phishing email. Yes, we have those education campaigns. We have a quarterly email issued from the CISO. That's fine. That's all we can do. But the real threat still exists. And I think along with the challenge to overcome the security around OT devices, I think education will play a part. Every individual needs to be equipped, and that message has to come not just from IT, but from HR. They need to be having skills to maintain a basic security hygiene. And I think that's the need of the hour. The new age workforce that will come about, which is bound to work in a remote manner or in a hybrid manner, needs to have a sense of security hygiene inbuilt. And then the company's security programs and education will further accelerate the necessary efforts to make sure that people reduce the risk of doing the wrong things.
Yep, and you've raised a number of good points. I think the, ensuring that we take the right preventative steps, the right proactive steps to prevent the attack, that's certainly important. But the other piece you kind of touched on as well is, are you prepared if there is an attack? I think with the increase of attacks that we're seeing on many organisations around the globe, that growing number of attacks each year, preparing for the potential attack and how would you react? I think that's another key point, and having that plan in place, having the technology, the tools available for if there is a breach, that you can respond to that quickly and you can recover any of that impact to the organisation. So some really good points raised there.
Sorry to interject. So I specifically mean that a lot for non-proprietary technology that is in use. That's the challenge.
Yes, exactly. And I think that's where, again, I think having the tools to ensure that you can detect and certainly identify those breaches within the organisation is important. So I think that complementing the education and some of the policies that you're implementing is certainly of key importance. Right. Anyone else have any other commentary around just how the pandemic, some of those changes, hybrid working has maybe changed security policies in your environment?
If I may.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think I just want to follow up from what Gautam has mentioned. On the OT part, agreed. I mean, it's just the same conceptually the same challenges, but in railway environment, it's a whole set of systems that we have to look at. I mean, we have had these issues been talked about for many years, but even the European Union has only recently came out with the first draft or first version for railway cybersecurity standards, and obviously it shows that, there's a lot of catching up to do at the industry level. In my case, it's railway, and obviously the same with manufacturing as well. And the other challenge, I think, that we're touching on this hybrid work and all that, if we look at the recent World Economic Forum in terms of the cybersecurity, so the talk now is not so much about cybersecurity, but we are moving towards the concept of cyber resilience, meaning that we already assume we are breached. It's not about how we protect, but it's about how we make sure that we control the breaches that will always and keep on happening from time to time. Again, I like to refer back to the NIST framework. So it's the third and the fourth pillar, where the first is just identify, protect and detect. We've been doing a lot on that. But I think we really need to focus on the next two pillars, which is the respond and recover. And this is where the cyber resilience, when we talk about cyber, it's about cyber resilience. And the flavor should be more towards that in terms of how we plot our way to move forward.
Exactly, and that's certainly I think a lot of guidance is it's not if but when you'll have to respond to that type of incident. So certainly preparing for that type of incident to occur, having the right policies, the right technologies in place to be able to recover is certainly a key step there. Now I think we're getting close to time. I guess just one more question. I think we've got time to fit in here, but how do all of you use any external threat intelligence or information just to keep ahead of some of the threats and keep ahead of some of the adversaries that we're having to deal with day to day? How are you all keeping across those trends? Anyone want to lead off, or maybe Rafiqul? Is it something in your organization you regularly having to keep across?
Yeah. So what we do is that, just like our other functions, so we have this run-ops and plus the projects. Now for the cyber, that is it comes under the ops, and it is actually headed by, and strangely, the ops is headed by our chief security officer, who reports to the CIO. So we have a very selected, a trained group of analysts who basically analyzes and works with the vendor. Our key vendors are basically two. One is Palo Alto and the other is Microsoft. And we do work with Amazon because we do use AWS to constantly revisit and understand what things could go wrong. That is one aspect. In terms of the ops support, we have a separate team. A part of that is, not a part, bulk of that is outsourced. So Cognizant is our ops support. They also do take care of the operational security. But in terms of decision and policy matters, it comes from our CIO and CISO's core team. That is the kind of it. Those are the things which we do. And that's the only thing to add. We have had actually challenges during the pandemic, in the sense, not that we were attacked, but we actually completed 2 M&As. That means we took over 2 large manufacturing sites, one in North Asia and the other in Southeast Asia. So, and they came from a different level of maturity. So, and they came with their own kind of hardware, which we obviously, for costing and optimization, we just couldn't abandon. And what was again complicated, and I'm sure Gautam knows this because he works in the semiconductor. We had an inordinate delay in terms of getting laptops and PCs, both from our 2 vendors, that is HP and Lenovo's. But at the same time, we could not allow these 2 large manufacturing sites to just continue with their current brand of hardware, in which we had no control, though they were connected. So we did some innovation, and we were happy that our team could bring in what we called Azure Windows Virtual Desk. So we never tried that before with very stringent controls, no access to our intranet, blah, blah, blah. But that did work. So that's the only thing which I can add.
Okay, and again, I think you're raising again some of the complexities we touched on before about the complexities that all of us are having to manage in our organisations. Could be subcontractors, could be M&A activity you're having to then increase that reach across a broader set of the organisation, or a new part of the organisation that, again, may not be well aligned from a cybersecurity perspective or policy perspective there. So that's certainly, again, adding to that additional complexity, and again, ensuring that, I guess, you do have the right policies, the right actions in place from both predictive, proactive, and reactive perspective to protect your organisation. So that's certainly a good perspective there that you shared, Rafiqul. So does anyone else have any other final thoughts around around how you're best staying ahead of these threats? What are you doing in your organisations to stay current and stay ensure you're maximising protection for your organisation?
One thing I would like to share here, because I think a lot more has been talked about how people are working remotely and managing their IT infrastructure. But in terms of OT, the remote working may not be the best solution, because now it's like working in the operation theater. And when you are working with the patient, you have to make sure patient is alive even after the operation is done. Similar is the case of OT, where the availability part of cybersecurity is taken on the topmost priority compared to the confidentiality and the integrity. So system has to make available, because they are interconnected with other production unit. So even one system is down, the whole unit will go down. And in that case, there are a lot of compliances that the manufacturing unit has to follow. Like in terms of pharma, we have FDA, we have GMP compliance, and so on. So if I talk from OT security point of view, I think a lot has been changed in terms of hybrid and remote working, but we are still at the 80% of the way we are working before pandemic, because we have to go to the site and we have to take care of the manufacturing system the way we were doing, and we are very less being moved to the remote working for OT manufacturing sites.
No, fantastic. And again, I think it just comes back to that complexity of OT again as another factor. How do we again stretch our security coverage across more technologies, again across other factors that are making your lives as CTOs more difficult day to day? So certainly some key points raised there. Well, and I think certainly appreciate all of the perspectives that we've had today. I think from a CTO perspective, again, it's great to get the insights from each of you on what you're doing in your organisations, in your industries. Giving some of our audience some perspectives on what they should be thinking about as well when they're thinking about cybersecurity and how to best protect their organisations from these growing threats as well. So certainly some great perspectives there from all of you. So appreciate it.